SC Media is proud to present this month's CISO Stories program, hosted by yours truly, Jessica Hoffman. This is a show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, please visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CRC. Greetings, everybody. We're here for another awesome episode of CISO Stories Podcast. You got me, yours truly, Jess Hoffman, back with you. We got TimBall in the house. What's up, Tim? How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jess?
Amazing. Every day is amazing. I'm so excited to have you with us. We talked the other day more recently. I'm glad Mandy introduced us. Shout out to Mandy with the Cyber Risk Alliance. So you are the CISO for NGO-ISAC. I think a lot of us are familiar with the ISACs, especially the MS and the election one as well, maybe even the financial. But can you tell us a little bit about what is the NGO-ISAC? What do you guys do there?
Sure. So the NGO-ISAC is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that helps other 501c3 nonprofit organizations get better at security. We're trying to share threats and threat information that we get from our member organizations. Currently, we have about 525, 550. The number keeps going up every day, so I'm not exactly sure where we're at for the moment. And we have a lot of good folks doing good work, but it's security, and especially in the NGO space, where we're working with mission-driven organizations whose primary job is not security. They may not have some of the resources that large companies do, and not have the ability to prioritize security well. So we come together as a team to listen to stories, to give advice, and to help each other dig through threats and figure out what's going on.
So is that mostly for like small, medium business, SMBs, or can you give an example of what type of clients, just so the folks listening, they might not know about your services and figure out if it's applicable for them?
So we do up and down. We have small NGOs that are like 3 or 4 team groups who are issue oriented, all the way up to billion-dollar foundations that are working on transnational issues. Here at the NGO-ISAC, we try to focus right now on US-based nonprofits, but there's no reason that we exclusively look at those. We're trying to expand as we can, but we're trying to expand meaningfully and sanely and in a way that, can scale appropriately. The NGO-ISAC has been around since about 2012. It started as an entirely volunteer organization because back then there was a threat actor who was tearing through a lot of the NGOs here in Washington, D.C. without naming names, because this threat actor managed to get in. We were able to, I can describe the ones that I worked at. So I was at the Center for American Progress, and we had a threat actor who tore through our network and was using it to harvest information. And while I was trying to triage the problem, I got onto their command and control servers and noticed that, hey, they're on some other people's networks. Maybe you should tell them. That informal sort of gathering of folks getting together and lamenting problems and discussing strategies about how to deal with the problem, how to because these folks were because this particular threat actor was extremely persistent. How to make sure that we stayed clean and no one was riding dirty, as we like to say. Uh, we it grew, and yeah, I've been a founding member since then, and recently we've gotten some amount of funding to professionalize our services. So now we have 4 members, 4 staff to sort of level up the the professional services within this organization.
That's awesome, Tim.
Thanks.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I didn't realize you were a founding member. That's super dope. You old school. You're riding dirty. I hear you. I got that song in my head. Riding dirty, riding dirty. Okay. So let's talk about some tool selection. So,
Oh,
yeah, fun stuff. That's this month's theme for our CISO story series. And as we talked before, I mean, obviously you have some skin in the game for some time, and your position now in other positions with a leadership and decision making position. And I also want to emphasize you have background in election security. So again, I know we don't need to name any names to get into any details with any particular client or organization that supports elections, but it's very timely now, obviously. And I was hoping maybe we could talk a little bit about your experience with the NGO-ISAC there or on the street as a security professional. What are your thoughts on election security right now? Are there any tidbits that you can share when it comes to tool selection or just your teams in general to be prepared for?
yeah. So I'd like to address the election security bits in the beginning. There are 3 pillar types of organizations within the election space. And the 3 teams can't really talk to each other due to both campaign finance laws and just regular laws. The 3 groups, they tend to be clustered into what is the EI-ISAC, the Election Infrastructure ISAC. These are secretaries of states. These are voting machine companies. These are the folks who are responsible for the nuts and bolts of the actual election process. They, and very rightly, no one else can play in their pool. We get that. That's totally normal and totally fine. I'd like to emphasize that right now in the United States, the election machines aren't the problem. I know that a lot of folks want to talk about how election machines have issues and problems, but it's just like every piece of information technology tooling. There's problems everywhere, but it's all about managing risk. Like that's our job as security professionals. We have to understand here's some accepted risk that we're willing to take on. Here's some unacceptable risk that we need to just take care of and deal with. And I think that the EI-ISAC folks have done a really, really, really good job in the last 4, 5, 8 years since this has become an issue that's been in the public's mind. The second group of folks is the campaigns and the campaign committees, and the super PACs. These are the candidates. These are the people who are directly running for another job. The way I describe elections is that a presidential campaign is unlike any job you've ever worked for because it is a company that starts off as 3 people. And then 18 months later, if you're lucky, it's 6,000 people. And our job is to get our mascot elected for a different job. And then the whole company just explodes and disappears. The committees try to be the sort of source of historic knowledge and making things better. I give super shout outs to the folks working in that space because they're doing a lot of really good work across an incredibly dynamic and hard landscape. They have few resources in terms of money. They have few resources in terms of people. They have lots and lots of well-intentioned folks giving them advice, constantly sort of bugging them with, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see that? and they need to keep their eyes on the prize. And, good job on them. The NGO-ISAC, we are working with the 501c3 mission-driven organizations, some of which are involved with what we're calling democracy partnerships, folks who are trying to get folks like driven to the polls or get, help people like get to the polls, help people like deliver pizza to like just purely election workers, helping doing canvas work and stuff like that, to drive mission driven work. The threat landscape there turns out is the same threat landscape that the other two organizations have. If you are, if you're a bad actor, a bad domestic actor, you have feelings. This is sort of in the hacktivist camp where you want to take out your feelings using a keyboard, and let's just go ahead and start popping organizations across the board because we can. Maybe we're not going to pop organizations because because campaign work isn't like, yes, we have websites. Yes, we have tooling, but these types of organizations, it's mostly about organizing people and getting people together. And so, bad guys, why don't we just attack people? Why don't we attack people's social medias? Let's try to do account takeovers. Let's try to do good old-fashioned spear phishing. Let's try to do some wide-ranging sort of run and gun, just password sprays across infrastructure and all that. We're seeing all of it right now, and it's a challenging landscape. And we're just trying to get to election day.
Aren't we all? We're fortunate here in Pennsylvania. I'm sure most states have the support, definitely, of the EI-ISAC, but we have tremendous support from our state as far as election security, our local FBI, as well as CISA. So there's an OEM too. So there's just a lot of, and Department of Homeland Security for the state and Pennsylvania State Police. So obviously this is a big deal and has become quite recently. And thanks for pointing out that it's not necessarily the machines, right? I think we've been tried and true there with showing the security there. But going back to like the tools, thank you for that breakdown, Tim. And if you're not sure why TimBall is qualified for election security, there's your cue to check him out on LinkedIn. Okay. Also, make sure you ask him how he got his black badge at DEF CON. Well, insert ping there. So let's go back to the tool stuff. I know when you and I talked the other day, we had this very quick and dirty. That's the word for today, dirty. We had this quick and dirty title for this podcast, TimBall's pet peeves for tools, which I love, but we had some time to think about it and structure it a bit more. So when it comes to election security or even just security period, NGO, what you all do for your clients, I'd say, because they're not necessarily, maybe clients, customers, whatever you want to call them, but you're out here doing good, right? You're spreading the good news of cyber. You're trying to get those organizations as secure as possible, understanding the risks, the risk posture, and holding hands. It sounds like with the analytics and all that. So kudos there again. So let's talk about some of the tools that you work with your clients on. Again, you don't got to get any specifics, but how do you go about when you're working with these organizations, selecting the tools for them or helping them to select the tools? And then once you select the tools, what does that look like from a market research perspective? Are there checklists that you go through? Can you talk a little bit about how you would advise your clients in that regard?
Yeah, sure. So for member organizations, members tend to come to our NGO and they'll ask questions like, hey, here's X tool. We just talked to a salesperson. Does anyone have familiarity with it? Is it good? Can it help? And typically when I hear this, I always have to go back to first principles. The first principles in the NGO world is that, one, the NGO is a mission-driven organization. They have a job to do, and that job is not security. Security tends to be is a cost center for them, that they have to put resources in the form of humans and full-time staff. Maybe they're going to go hire an MSP or an MSSP, and they don't necessarily have time to become security experts. That's where the NGO-ISAC is here to help. We've seen a lot, we've done a lot. I've worked for a couple of security vendors in my past, and we're here to share good taste, to be able to give our member organizations the guidance and help and suggestions to get through to what they want. So typically, this whole thing comes down to what I call getting to A. So a member will come up and say, hey, I need C. I think I need C. Can anyone help me with C? And you say, what the heck is C? And they're like, well, C is related to B. And I don't know how to do B, but like, I know C is a word. So yeah, C, can you help me with C? And I was like, well, so to make it more concrete, some member will come up and say, hey, we need a pen test. That's their C. Can anyone help us with a pen test? I've checked out these companies and they're going to do a pen test and the prices are all over the board and we're not sure which pen test we should go with. C. And so my immediate question is, why do you need a pen test? And they say, well, won't a pen test tell me what we need to take care of and prioritize for our cybersecurity needs? And I go, no, but what are you actually trying to get at? And they're like, well, we want to be more secure. And I like to go one layer deeper and I say, you want to be confident, you want to not be scared. Because right now, you want a pen test because you're scared of some of these existential dreads that you have that you don't know, that may or may not exist. And you think that getting a pen test will give you this list of things that you can go out and just start knocking out and taking care of. And then like magically that will give you A, which is I feel secure and I feel confident about my threat stance and how we are within our cybersecurity posture and maturity. And I say, nope. Why don't we start with A? You want to be not afraid. Let's start with just security basics. The biggest problem I find with tooling is that because of marketing trends, because of hype, there's a big trend in folks just chasing after things that are shiny. And shiny is nice, but like, I'll be very frank with you. I don't think you need to deal with AI security right now so much as patch management or asset control or just like, hey, what is your bring your own device sort of like thing? How are you securing your principals? How are you securing the most important staff that you have? Your important staff, your principals probably need a little bit more help because they tend to be a little bit older. They tend to be a lot less computer literate. They tend to be, for lack of a better word, less patient with learning. And so we need to come to them, not with fear, but with confidence to be able to say, hello, boss, I'm here to help take care of you. Here's the things that I'm worried about for you. Can you tell me what you're worried about for you as well? So that we can put together a better plan about how you live in the world today that is 2024 and not ask for security advice from someone that will give you advice that was valid in 2008. Like we see a lot of that. Now, on the specifics of tooling.
Here we go. Let's go, TimBall. Let's go.
Man, like, so security tooling is a cost center, right? Like flat out, if you're going to be paying for a bunch of tools, it costs you money, it costs you time, it costs you you need to hire someone to, one, you need to buy the tool. Two, you need to hire someone that's going to run the tool well. Three, you need to trust that the information that's going to be coming out of the tool is going to be actionable in some way to you. This is a tall order. This is a lot of stuff. And then, so a lot of folks will try to say, oh, we do that, we do this, we do that. Do you though? Like, do you though? When it comes to tooling, I tell member orgs, hey, let's first just stop. Let's do the thing. Let's take an asset inventory. What services and tooling do you use today? What security services can you get out of those toolings that you're already paying for? What things are you just, like, did you pay for an E5 license already? Cool. Let's just stop there and just deal with the fact that you have an E5 license that you don't know what you're doing anything with. Like one shout out to Microsoft. Like we can get there. Like there's also a value proposition, which is we're generating a lot of data, and I don't know, even in large companies, can you process all of that data and turn that into reasonable security metrics? Because not all data is security metrics. In fact, I contend that the trick in the security world is knowing what is a security metric, what is relevant to you security-wise, and what is not. And you can just take everything in that giant pyramid of pain and look at the pyramid of pain and say, that's not helping me. This data is not helping me anywhere near this pyramid of pain. It's doing nothing for me. So maybe we can get rid of it. I know that for a lot of folks, that sounds like a terrifying thing. I know that another terrifying thing that I say is that when you rely on your vendors for security, to give you security alerts, you trade the knowledge of what's going on. This is okay. This is okay. Everything will be okay. Because if your Google workspace pops up and says, hey, it looks like your users are being targeted by nation state threat actors. Cool. Then we should go ahead and start doing some work to go figure out what's going on. But first, we should go ask Google, can we have a phone call and talk about this alert that some of my users are getting to their personal accounts? Can we get an alert and a phone call to discuss what data that you are seeing that we are unaware of? And can you give us pointers about where we should be digging in within our own data to go help you, the more professional investigators, find information that helps you solve our problem?
Yeah, let's dig into that for a second. Sorry.
Sure.
You just said a lot there. Super cool.
I know.
Just that last, it's super cool. You're super cool, TimBall.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do, man.
I like to say I'm a dummy that just wears a gray shirt and talks.
Wait, what's the shirt called you have on?
This is my business shirt. That's not what
you called it. That's not what you called it before the show. That's okay. We'll leave that alone. All right. No, but right. You were just talking about log fatigue and just the human factor. Like,
oh yeah.
And that's what happens, right? There's some alert that comes out, goes to the wrong people or even the right people, but the wrong type of communication happens and everybody's on fire and it turns out to be nothing. So I see that a lot, making sure, and I like to talk a lot about emotional intelligence, meeting people where they are. And that's something you were talking about also, knowing your audience. So yeah, just that human factor is huge. Can't stress that enough. I think that comes a lot with experience because you got to learn who you're working with, how they handle things, but also who your partners are. So when we're talking about your tool selection, relationship wise, making sure that you have that open line of communication, you know who to talk to. They know what your needs are, your desires, your metrics for success, and where your future strategic planning is going when it comes to the tool, as well as everything else. But also, what you talked about, which I keep finding it a theme in every single show that we've been doing, but really just life. That basic cyber hygiene. Oh my goodness. What's your inventory? What's your critical systems and services? What tools you have? Are they being optimized? Blah, 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 right? Just
Is
all
your
those
MFA,
things.
what's your MFA coverage?
Oh my
Like,
gosh. What's MFA?
what's that?
What
Yeah,
is
let's start with
MFA?
what's MFA?
What is MFA? I mean, I swear I've been hearing this word for like 20 years now. I mean, I don't, maybe not 20, at least 15. It's like MFA, who, what, really? Okay. Anyway, good, all good stuff there. So, let's talk about relationships a little bit as far as relationship with your tool vendor. We kind of touched on it just now, as far as like when the ish hits the fan, they know who to talk to on our side. We know who to talk to on their side. And, we can definitely not flame, excuse me. We don't want no flames, frame the situation to where we know what's the next best step, especially when we talk about comms and everything. So tell me what your take on is. How important is the relationship with your tool vendors, and what does that look like in your experience, especially with your members? Do you facilitate that? Do you give tips on that? What is
I
that?
do. I do. So, like, to me, when we're helping member organizations evaluate what set of toolings that they have, what they're really asking is, does anyone else have a relationship with this vendor? Does anyone feel good about talking with these guys or gals? And that's probably the best piece of advice that we give. We can sit down and say, hey, these guys, they're great. You'll never hear from them. They'll never talk to you. They'll never email you. They'll just do stuff, and then once a quarter, when it comes time to do their briefing, they'll just give you a ton of things. And unless something's on fire, unless it's really hit the fan, they'll be good for you. Other vendors, they try to show value by constantly having meetings, and their tooling looks like just sort of like an orange red flame of just everything's on fire. And like you turn on that tool and you say, oh, everything's on fire. I'm really scared of your tool. And then the vendor will say, well, you need to groom those alerts. And you're like, can you help me groom those alerts? You've seen these alerts before. Surely you can help me groom these, because I'm not 100% sure what this means, because this alert's coming from your tool. I don't know how to read this. And some vendors are a lot better at that client management and client success than others. And that client success bit is helpful. But even before all of that starts, what I really like to just talk to with vendors about is like, hey, can we get some transparency in pricing? Like, most of my members, we're nonprofits. Every dollar counts. These are not for-profit companies that are just like raking in dollars hand over fist. A lot of it comes from grants. A lot of it comes from endowments. A lot of it comes from just, at the end of the day, it comes from donations. And if we don't spend that donation money well, we're burning that money, and it's hurting us. And I know that a lot of security vendors, they'll have like a link on their webpage that just says, hey, pricing. And you click on the pricing page and it says, contact us. I don't love that. I wish. And so like what tends to happen is, very discreetly, members come into our Slack and say, hey, we're about to sign a contract with these folks. This is what the price looks like. Does that sound good? And we'll say, oh, no, no, that's triple or whatever. Like, you know what? I'm just going to name names. VMware just did a thing where they got bought out by Broadcom, and all of a sudden prices for existing customers went up by a factor of 4 to 6. And we had a couple of folks to be like, "Hey, um, VMware jacked the price up." I was like, "What? How? Like how much? Like 10, 20%?" Like they're like, "No, like 400%." I was like, "Are you? Is that real?" And they're like, "No, that's part of their plan." I was like, "Well, part of your plan should be to leave. We can help you find something new." Um, but like transparency in pricing, especially being able to give mission driven organizations breaks on pricing, because our members will give you, your security company, really good data, like extremely pointed data that you'll be able to use to track threat actors, because are mission driven organizations, they have a mission, and there will be some threat actors that just don't like that mission. And so like this is going to be very good targeted data that security company will be able to help enrich their data for their other customers.
Pricing, tooling pricing is paramount, obviously, especially for these smaller businesses. And it sounds sounds like your members, you have a wide array of them as well. We have an organization in Pennsylvania called the County Commissions Association of PA, and they distribute funding throughout the Commonwealth for counties, municipalities, local government, including Philadelphia, to help with to help support that from a lobbyist perspective, and also they help control pricing with certain vendors. So, we're lucky in the Commonwealth of PA to have that, and I'm sure other states have something very similar. So I know that's specific to government, but just like it sounds like NGO-ISAC, you can play a part there. And I know we're running up on time, but I also just want to give a little tidbit, as somebody in executive level too, when it comes around to those annual fees and it goes up by 30%, I'm sorry, 3%, okay? Just know, folks, that you can negotiate, okay? Don't hate the player, hate the game, okay? For all you vendors out there with the 3%, I'm just saying, we understand you're using it for research fees and this and that, but hopefully you understand that as a valued client, we don't always have that extra 3%. So work with us, as TimBall just said.
It's not 3%, it's 3x. like 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 I'm okay with charging some moderate increase in price, especially if the tool's been helpful. Like after a year, I'm a big fan, like especially afterwards. Like you buy a tool, you get through the pipeline, you start valuing it, and you have it in your stack, and you're using it. You definitely should put in a retrospective 6 months into the project, year into the project, and then every 6 months afterwards going forward, just to sit down and say, hey, this thing, is it doing good? Do we like it?
Right.
Is it helping? Is it causing more work than we wanted to before? Should we be looking for things within the marketplace that might serve us better? You should always be mindful for that. You don't want to just fall in the sort of like, you don't just want to fall in the trap of inertia and like the fixed cost fallacy, saying, hey, we've paid for this thing for 3 years and we can't get out of it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you
Like you can
can.
absolutely get out of it. It's just a question of, is now the time to do it? And if you don't have good criteria for, is now the time to do it, maybe you should. And this is something that I regularly talk with our member organizations, just to sit down and say, hey, does that feel good? And sort of in mass, the NGO-ISAC will make a recommendation. Sometimes we'll all pivot away from one tool because it stopped being as helpful as it used to be, and we'll be on to the next thing.
Yeah, good point. So a lot of gems here today. We talked a little bit about excuse me. A lot of gems here today. We talked a lot about election security, and thanks for breaking that down. In your experience there, talked about basic cyber hygiene when it comes to getting that in order before buying these fancy tools that we won't name Splunk. Um, Talked about the human factor there, which is super, super critical, regardless of any tools you have, right? And also what you just said about the power and community. So if you're not part of a cyber community, whatever that looks like for your organization, you need to be, because it's so critical to be able to bounce off ideas. And as TimBall said, I'm more likely to look into a tool. Excuse me. I'm more likely to look into a tool or a service because it was recommended by a peer.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly value there. So you said that, excuse me. Whew. TimBall, you said that you listened to 2 of my episodes, so you should know what question I'm going to ask next.
Oh yeah, what are you hitting me with?
So, TimBall, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self right now?
Oof. Yeah. 1, stop smoking. 2,
That's real.
2, just you're doing good. You're doing good. 18-year-old me was unconfident about his curiosities and his interests. He wanted, and he was sort of pushed around, not pushed around, but like I followed a lot of different interests, and I wasn't able to sort of really focus on many of them. And it wasn't until I got more mature and wiser to sit and say, hey, I don't need to be great at everything. I'm not going to be good at baseball. I'm not going to be a pro biker. I'm not going to be a pro chef, although I've dabbled. I'm going to be a knowledge-based worker. I'm going to do a lot more communication with folks and learning how to, 1, listen. Just be empathic. Don't let the ADD take over. Listen. Don't wait to talk. just follow what people are saying, because what they're saying, that's right at the top of their brain. That's the thing that they're trying to get out. So be there for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that. All good, valuable information there, advice. So, want to thank you for being on the show and also give you a shout out. TimBall has been on the DEF CON SOC Goon team for years, and he's also the lead. 11 years he's been working that. So thank you for your service, TimBall. We know it's not easy. You mentioned you used to be the one up there
I
causing
have my DEF
problems.
CON Goon flag in the back right here.
Yes. You mentioned you used to be the one causing problems, and now you're the one stopping everybody cause problems. So, got to be on both sides, right?
Yeah.
The enforced and the enforcer. So, we appreciate you very much, TimBall, for real. This has been great info. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, please, if you're a nonprofit and you're looking to upgrade your security, or know somebody that's a nonprofit that needs to upgrade their security, please just go to NGO-ISAC.org. That's NGO-ISAC.org. We have a Join Us link. You sign up, fill the form, and we'll get right back to you. And hopefully we can get you on board. We'd love to get more members in. We want to see a bigger diversity of members, not just DC, New York, and places, but like all of the United States. There are tons and tons of community organizations that cybersecurity is becoming a growing problem for them, and they're just scared. And I don't want, cybersecurity education today is in the same place that sex education was in the 1950s. Like, it's a lot of anecdotal advice, it's a lot of playground sort of words and just things from peers. Join our ISAC. We will get you above that fray. We'll give you some frameworks that we can go ahead and learn and get better at all of this together, because it's 2024 and we don't need advice from the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Not you ending this talking about sex education the same as cyber education in the 1950s. So we're going to go now. All right, TimBall, it's been a pleasure having you. Super fun. We'll get you back another time. Appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great time. Until next week. See you guys later.
Good night.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast, and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode. Thanks for joining.